Welcome to Inside Outside Innovation, episode 102. Sunayna Tuteja is a lead in TD Ameritrade's innovation department and a speaker at the IO Innovation Summit happening this week. In her conversation with Brian, she shared a preview of what's to come during her dialogue, including the 4 pillars of their approach to innovation at TD Ameritrade, up-and-coming trends for startups and corporations to keep their eyes on, and why FinTech is in a unique position when it comes to innovation. Inside Outside Innovation is hosted by Brian Ardinger, founder of Next, a provider of research, events, and consulting services that helps innovators and entrepreneurs build better products, launch new ideas, and compete in a world of change and disruption. Find out more at next.co. That's nxxt.co.
So, I'll kind of use the Wayback Machine and go back to, I think I was like 8 or 9. And no, I didn't know what innovation was then. But, what it reminded me, so I grew up in Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton, Alberta. And, I'm the daughter of first-generation immigrants who are also small business owners. And I remember vividly that, my dad, it would be a fun little thing. My dad would take me to the bank every week as he was making his small business deposits, or he was meeting with his small business advisor or his financial advisors. And, it was like a fun thing, right? So I got to go to the bank with him. But one of the memories I vividly remember, Brian, was how that experience always felt one-sided, and it always felt so clinical. And what I mean by that is, listen, Canadians, they're very nice people, so the bankers were all great. But, I remember once asking my dad, I'm like, I don't get it. Isn't it like your money? Like, why do you have, why are we always coming here to ask for permission to do things? Like, it's your business, you're working hard, you're making this money. And I just remember, always feeling like it was just so clinical, and it was always like this one-sided conversation where you were told what you could and couldn't do. And, and I think that kind of just always stuck with me. You kind of fast forward, and, so I got into finance, started working in banking. But again, I think my focus was always about, this notion that, why is finance always so complex, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it full of jargon? It's like where we go out of our way to keep people out versus being inclusive. And then couple that with, as a millennial, kind of growing up with the explosion of technology, the other, thing that I started to notice was how everything in our life was being impacted by technology. And if you take that same correlation, think about our relationship with money, and over the last decade or so, our relationship with money has been, profoundly impacted by technology, right? From everything about how you make money, the whole gig economy that is now a way for people to make money is fueled by technology, to how you save money, to how you spend money, to how you invest money. Everything is profoundly impacted by technology. So it just so happened that my worlds kind of collided, between my finance background and always kind of looking and working in technology. Now, I don't know that I went into thinking that I would do innovation, but I think having that mission within me to how can we democratize financial services just led me into roles where it was always about building something new or solving a problem and doing it with the most nascent and advanced technology. And that kind of brought me into TD Ameritrade. And to your point, TD Ameritrade has been great because, we pride ourselves at the notion that 42 years ago, we were the original FinTech, right? That along with the Schwabs and the Ricketts and the Roger Reineys of the world, they disrupted wealth management, and they made it, they democratized it so anybody could, participate in the capital markets. So I think my personal mission so strongly aligns with TD Ameritrade's, mission of kind of creating experiences that make lives and investing better for everybody.
It's quite interesting, and to see the evolution of a company that, again, like you said, kind of disrupted their own space, and now how do you continue to stay on that path? Because I think that's where a lot of corporations and that kind of fall off. They find that business model, that optimization engine, so to speak, and they have a tough time adapting to that new stuff. And part of that maybe, the fact that, like you mentioned, there's so many new technologies that are out there, whether it's artificial intelligence or machine learning or cryptocurrencies, that are probably going to have an impact. It kind of forces you to stay on your toes a little bit more. But how is TD Ameritrade kind of approaching innovation and all the new changes that are happening inside and outside the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I split my time between New York and San Francisco. So, I often have to kind of reset my, kind of have to change my mindset a little bit when I'm hopping on that flight from Newark to SFO or SFO back to Newark, because there is a big difference between, the outlook and the usage of technology and the adoption of these technologies as you see in Silicon Valley versus, contrast between Wall Street. But I think, everybody's progressing towards the right, outcomes. So I think at TD Ameritrade, what we start with is, listen, there is the absolute acknowledgement that, number one, like just the velocity and variety of new technologies coming our way is just daunting. But it's also exhilarating, right? Look, think of all the technologies that you just named in the last couple of seconds, right? We could all play a fun game of buzzword bingo, right? So there's no shortage of new technologies. But I think what really excites and also focuses my team is this notion of the technologies are great, but the technologies are a means to the end. And what I mean by that is we really focus on consumer behavior. So how are these technologies fundamentally, impacting and changing consumer behaviors and expectations? So, I'll give you an example. Regardless of where you grew up in the world, Brian, and regardless of what demographic we are, many of us, if not all of us, received a consistent piece of advice, mostly from our mothers, which was, don't get into a stranger's car. If a stranger pulls up next to you, scream, run, knock on a neighbor's door, but just get away from there, right?
Only if they have candy.
Right? Yes, even if they have candy, definitely if they have candy. Well, think about what many of us did today or this week, or the folks that are coming to your conference probably did, right?
Yep.
They went to their phone, they tapped on their favorite ride-sharing app, thereby summoning a stranger and voluntarily getting into a stranger's car. No kicking, no screaming, no muss, no fuss, right? It's a cheeky example, but the reason I share that is, listen, there were a lot of amazing technological advances that went into the creation of the Ubers, the Lyfts, the ride-sharing economy, and the gig economy at whole, right? However, it's the impact of that experience that we really focus on. Think about it. The consumer expectation has changed. Societal norms have shifted, right? And the reason we care about that is because those consumers are now going to bring those expectations to TD Ameritrade, and it is incumbent on us, right, to meet and exceed those expectations. Everything in our lives today is on demand, right? You can get your food on demand, your transportation on demand. So that expectation that why should financial services be any different? And, our overlying thesis in everything we do, tapping into these technologies, but also these partnerships, is how do we, start to make that investing experience more accessible, more intelligent, and more personalized, because those are the expectations and behaviors that today's consumers and tomorrow's consumers, have kind of come to bear from us and from other brands.
Can you share a little bit about how is TD Ameritrade actually doing that? I know that there's different ways that corporations are kind of attacking the innovation puzzle, whether it's both inside the organization, putting together teams to do idea sprints and things along those lines, all the way to investing in startups and that. What's kind of the approach that you're using within TD Ameritrade to kind of tackle this innovation?
I also have a lot of empathy for big companies. It's often easy to say, oh, you're not innovating or fast enough, because I think, big successful companies have to strike that balance, right? When you are delivering great shareholder value today and producing earnings and taking care of your employees, you can't just shrug that off. But it's that striking that balance of delivering for today while you're building for tomorrow. And at TD Ameritrade, first of all, we're very fortunate that, our CEO, Tim Hockey, and he's very active on Twitter, and people should follow him. When he came to TD Ameritrade a couple of years ago, he kind of set that as the marker, right? And accountability for himself, but also for the organization. And again, reminding everybody that, hey, guys, we are the original FinTech, right? And, we should be participating in the next iteration of the disruption in FinTech and not just kind of wait for it to happen. So he talked a lot about, how do we start kickstart our own metabolism, right? So the way we do it is a lot of the examples that you've shared, and I think it's important. A lot of companies often think that there's a playbook, and there is, but it does require a lot of experimentation, right? So we look at, how do we spur innovation at every level, top down, but also equally bottom up, right? Whether it's innovation sprints, whether it's hackathon. We have a great advanced tech team that focuses on research and prototyping. We've got the whole lean culture and the agile culture, which which has been a great accelerant. And then specific to my team, they call us the Tiger Team. We are a small but scrappy little group with representations from different areas of the organization. So I have a product and partnership team, and then an engineering team, and our mission is, again, rooted in, how do we tap into the power of these new technologies to solve problems, and couple it with these new partnerships, whether it's with the big tech companies, whether it's with VCs and startup ecosystem, but at the end of the day, deliver value for the end client, but also for TD Ameritrade in the sense that we're building adjacencies and business models for the future. So those are some different ways that, we continue to spur and ignite innovation across the organization. But one of the things I share with everybody at TD Ameritrade, but the innovation just doesn't reside with my team. We are all stewards in making this happen, and everybody's accountable for, kind of doing their part in their span of control, because we could all be doing better in the worlds that we lead and in the functions that, we do day to day.
So does the Tiger Team, their responsibilities innovation, but do they kind of help curate and help the other groups, or how does that actually play out in reality?
So one of our mantras is we use the 4 S's for the Tiger Team. So that will give you some clarity. So number one is we go all the way from sensing and discovering the technologies to forming partnerships with the tech companies, the startup and VC ecosystem, but then also to commercializing, right? Mm-hmm. So that was an important component of it, because one of the things I've learned, again, hearing your podcast and talking to other leaders in companies that are, on similar journeys, is that commercialization component is very critical. If not, often there's a stigma that, there's just this group on the side that's, chasing shiny objects, or they're having fun or whatever. And we were very clear that that was not our mandate. And the way we look at it is we work internally across the enterprise with all of our business leaders and stakeholders to understand what are the problems we're looking to solve, what is the feedback, what is the voice of the client telling us, right, in terms of things that they're expecting. But then also we're looking at these technologies to figure out what's the art of the possible, right? Because that adage of if you asked anybody, nobody would have said they needed an iPhone until we all got one, right? So we want to look at it from multiple angles, but that anchor of we are solving a specific problem is critical. And then it's about, so the first S is you solve a problem. The second is you deliver with speed. All of our execution, we go from ideation to execution in less than 60 days. And that's paramount, right? Because we want to show those wins. We want people to start using the output of these ideas, and then obviously we will iterate. Everything is perpetual beta, but you have to put a win out there for people to use, and kind of start to get a sense of what's next. And then the third is you build for scale. We have grand ideas, but we're okay to start small. But everything we build with that notion of, okay, what's going to happen when 1 million or 5 million consumers are going to use this? So making sure that the foundation is strong. And then the fourth thing is always be shipping, right? And that's the core part of our ethos is our mandate is to go from ideation to commercialization and do it very quickly and do it in a way that you're solving problems and delivering next-gen solutions.
Yeah, I love it. And that last S of shipping, I think, is often overlooked. In innovation teams, they get to a point and constantly killing ideas, but at some point you've got to actually deliver something into the marketplace and see what actually happens. So I really appreciate that. We talked a little bit about some of the broad trends in that, but you're in the trenches of fintech and that. So, and I know that you've worked on a variety of things, everything from voice with Alexa and some of that kind of stuff to like you mentioned, artificial intelligence. And that. What are some of the kind of key trends or technologies that you're kind of either most scared of or looking forward to, and how that's playing out in the marketplace?
It's that saying, right? If it's not scaring you, then you're not pushing the envelope hard enough or something. So, but yeah, so I think that I would kind of break it down into 4 categories. The first 2 categories are things that we start to commercialize, and we've got several examples I can touch on. The first one is this whole notion of smart interfaces, right? I read a stat the other day that I think by 2020, 80% of humanity will have a computing device, right? And majority of it will be a mobile device. Right. However, Now it's extending, like it used to be you had to have like a computer and go home to use it. Then it became laptops. Then we all have these smartphones. But now every individual not just has a smartphone, we have multiple computing interfaces that we engage with, every day. Like, I have an Alexa, I have my Apple Watch, I have my iPad, I have my laptop, I have my Nest. So, you may have a drone, you may have your, Oculus Go. Essentially, all of these are computing interfaces, right? And they're smart interfaces. So I think the proliferation of these interfaces is very fascinating, and how consumers are adopting to it. Like Alexa is only a few years old. I think it's
Right.
not even 5 years old, but look at the proliferation and the usage and the number of skills, and again, how it's changing consumer behaviors, right? So that's one. The second one I would say is, you touched on it, you cannot escape artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? And I think, again, our goal is how do you take that technology and you commercialize it in a meaningful way? And some of the examples you've seen from TD Ameritrade recently is what we launched in partnership with Apple on Apple Business Chat, what we've delivered on Facebook Messenger, and then also Alexa-powered devices where, the investing is made more intelligent, but we've also made investing accessible because now we're going to where the consumer is. Right? We don't have to wait for Brian to come to our website or come to our mobile app. Hey, Brian, if you use iOS or if you use Android or if you love talking to Alexa, we will bring you the best of TD Ameritrade, whether it's our trading platforms, our expertise, our education, market updates, to wherever you are, and render it in a way that matches your expectations. So, and AI and machine learning are what help deliver that elegant utility and delightful experience. So I would say those two are critical. And then the other two, AR and VR, if you followed F8 and with their launch of Oculus Go, I think has a lot of potential of how it's going to start to really make VR much more mainstream. So, lots of great possibilities there. And then the last one, everyone's talking about it, the notion of crypto networks, right? Not just cryptocurrencies, but this whole notion of the possibility that crypto networks can, and blockchain, the
Right.
decentralization impact that they have and what that could mean, not just for FinServe, but, society at large. So we kind of look at those four very closely.
I like that a lot. And, you mentioned it, but at the end of the day, it comes back to that seamless experiences that you're creating for the consumer, whether, regardless of the technology that's deploying it, but you have to be on your game about how you actually use those particular technologies or that you don't get the experience right. So.
Yeah, because if not, you fall into the trap of chasing shiny objects,
Right.
And that's why I think that having that anchor, and that's why being a mission-driven team is so critical. And again, having that pathway of sensing a technology, ideating on its possibilities, but having, I'm very grateful for, TD Ameritrade and the support we get from our leaders and our partners, and then, my amazing Tiger team. Like, you tell them something's impossible, they just get even more driven to prove that it's possible. But I think, we're always anchored in that notion of the voices of consumer, and, and the gnarlier the problem, the more excited we get. So I don't know, maybe that makes us a masochist, but I think therein lies the value. And I think that touches on something. Oftentimes what I hear in FinServe is we almost take like the approach of, well, we would love to do something, but we're in financial services and we're regulated. We
Right.
actually turn away the opportunity. I actually take more of a contrarian approach of the fact that we're so regulated and the constraints within we have to work with actually makes us more purposeful, right? It actually grounds us to make sure that we're using these technologies to deliver experiences that are solving real problems and making a real impact. So that would be like my one pass along, and the learning that we've had is don't let regulations slow you down. And listen, I love my happy fun group and my BFFs in compliance and legal and risk, and we work very closely with them. But I think if you have that art of the possible mindset, being in FinServe is actually great because it's a target-rich environment. We have a lot of problems to solve, and we have a long way to go in terms of, democratizing financial services. And I think it's a great time to be in the industry at the nexus of finance and tech, to be, leading that movement and kind of building for the future.
That's the end of another episode of Inside Outside Innovation. Thanks for listening. At the IO Innovation Summit this week, you can expect to hear more about what Sunayna shared in her conversation with Brian, as well as some learnings she's gathered with her team, including the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let us know how the summit is going at the IO Summit on Twitter, or if you couldn't make it, what you took away from the podcast at the IO Podcast. Until next time, go out and innovate.